So they're shooting tear gas and they're coming closer and closer. Oh, shit! There's tear gas everywhere. They shot like 20 rounds in less than a minute, and it's all over the camp, so they closed all the doors and people are running for cover.
All across Palestine, the youth are taking to the streets to protest the current state of affairs in the occupied West Bank.
احنا عندنا هون معظم الشباب طالعين من راسهم، فيش فصيل يتبناها او اي شغله.
فيش حدا بتعمل ولا اي شيء، فكر انه احنا صغار، بس ما بيعرفوش انه احنا جوانا شيء قاعد بتحرك.
قد ايه عمرك؟
عمري 15 سنة.
The protests we saw were sparked completely by the youth. Even the volunteer medics that were treating the injured were kids. As the casualties poured in, we talked to the protesters on the ground about why they're risking their lives.
مين اللي ورا الهبة هاي؟
ورا هاي الهب الشباب.
الهبة مين؟
الشباب تضايقت خنقت لا شغل، بيخلصوا جامعات بدون يعني بيكونوا بخلصوا دراسته وبقعد في الدار، ما فيش اشغال إلنا، ما فيش لنا منفذ.
ونحن كلنا يعني كل فلسطين من بنات من شباب يطلعوا يعني ويدافعوا عن أرضهم، قضيتنا واحدة.
The losses here have continued.
The prospects for young Palestinians are extraordinarily limited. No horizon, no future. Things are much worse today after Oslo.
In 1993, the Oslo Accords were supposed to begin a path towards peace and established an interim government in the West Bank known as the Palestinian Authority. What was the expectation of the Palestinian Authority?
That this was the embryo of a Palestinian state. The Oslo Agreement was supposed to accomplish a continued negotiation. The hope was that it would lead to a two-state solution, and the Palestinians could have some arrangement for autonomy or self-government within that. Unfortunately, it's deluding very few people in Palestine and a lot of people outside into thinking that the Palestinians are well on the way to statehood. They're not. They've moved away from self-determination since Oslo.
So in a sense, the Palestinian Authority itself is an illusion.
It is. It's a cardboard facade behind which nothing exists.
There haven't been any presidential elections in more than 10 years since President Mahmoud Abbas came to power. And with polls showing that nearly 70% of the population want him out of office, the anger on the streets is palpable.
فعليا احنا لازم قبل ما نبلش في اليهود تمام نثور على السلطه تاعتنا نطهر حالنا قبل ما نخوض معركه زي هاي. الاحزاب فعليا قاعده تتكاتل انه انا بدي اخذ هذا الكرسي وهذا الكرسي وانا بدي انو بلم اكثر مصاري يعني هذا كل همه انه يلم مصاري.
سمعت في الايام الاخيره كثيرا من الاقوال حول السلطه وهدم السلطه وتدمير السلطه وسحب السلطه. السلطه انجاز من انجازاتنا لن نتخلى عنها.
Just down the street from Mahmoud Abbas's presidential palace, we found a group of protesters calling for him to step down.
مش بطلع على التلفزيون نحن لا احنا من كلهم احنا اللي في الميدان. لا ابو مازن سوى ولا ابو عمار حتى سوى، فيش حدا سوى، بس الشباب الجيل هذا هو اللي راح يسوي.
ذاك يا شباب.
مبسوطين من الفصائل اللي هون لانه مضيق علينا اقتصاديا وسياسيا واجتماعيا. حسب نظرتنا احنا كشباب القياده الحقيقيه هي اللي بتكون بالصف الامامي مش بالصف الورا، مش بتتفرج علينا لا بتكون معنا في
A lot of the Palestinian youth tell us that they see the Palestinian Authority as a symbol of the occupation. Why would they be saying that?
Well, the aspect of the Palestinian Authority that's most unacceptable to Palestinians is its security cooperation with Israel.
That's because, under the Oslo agreements, the Palestinian Authority's security forces are charged with maintaining the peace, which includes suppressing protests. But it's what the PA can't do that's angering the Palestinians, which is their inability to stop Israelis from creating new settlements in the occupied West Bank.
What has happened since 1967 is the establishment of communities of Israelis inside the occupied territories. Every place that a settler goes, the military goes. Every place the military goes, restrictions against the native population, the Palestinians, follow. This is why settlements are such an enormous factor in the West Bank and occupied East Jerusalem.
We met up with Daniel Luria, the head of an organization that helps move Jewish Israelis into East Jerusalem, reclaiming land they say is theirs by divine right.
I'm going to take you now to a predominantly Arab neighbourhood, and about 12 years ago, Jews started to return to the old village. I am warning you that there's a guy coming up now that can be exceptionally hostile. He's been arrested a few times, so I'm very quick with my gun if I have to.
Okay, good to know. So you're carrying a gun. What's he saying?
He says all of this is a lie, and you are robbers. This is everything here.
This is the center.
Whose land is this?
Right.
Whose land is Jerusalem? Whose land is Israel?
Why can't it be both people's land?
Can't be.
Why not?
Doesn't work.
You can tell that this is as tense as it gets.
Come.
Before 1948, this used to be an old synagogue.
That's correct.
And now...
It's been returned.
It's been returned.
Correct.
So last week, there were families living here.
Correct.
And they were the ones who were...
And those were illegally squatting in an old synagogue.
For 77 years, they were living here.
In a synagogue.
Reconstruction started here immediately. But this isn't the only new settlement on this block. We met a couple just as they moved in down the street. So when do you move in?
Oh, straight away. There's the honeymoon. And he just got married, he's moving in now.
But just as settlers were moving into one house, we met a Palestinian family that was being evicted from theirs.
احنا عايشين هان من 48. هذا البيت وهذا البيت، هذا البيت تبعي، انا قاعد هان. طلع العفش هان، هي كله مكسر. هذا جاي من السويد. قالوا هاي الارض إلنا.
As both sides maintain claims to the land, the Israeli settler population has increased dramatically.
The settler population has tripled in the last 25 years. There were a couple 100,000 after about 25 years of occupation. There are another 400,000 for a total of 600,000 today.
The Palestinians see these settlements as a provocation, but when they clash with settlers, Israel escalates its security measures across the region. Nowhere is this more pronounced than the city of Hebron. So right now we're crossing through one of the checkpoints in Hebron. Security is so tight here, the city's been divided into sections, with the majority of Palestinians living in an area called H1 and the Israeli settlers living in H2, which is where we were. All of the shops are closed. There's absolutely no one in the streets. It feels like a ghost town. This street we're walking on has been off limits to Palestinians for years by order of the Israeli military. Right over there is a Palestinian cemetery. If you look, all of the tombstones are written in Arabic. It's literally 2 feet away from a street where Palestinians can't come. And even on the Palestinian side, back in H1, we could see how rigid this divide was.
لا هذا الملعب كان إلنا، هذا العرب كلها كان إلنا.
وهلا؟
هذا أخذوه منا الجيش.
إمتى؟
كنت هون أجي كثير جيش أعونه. كلهم بلاطق. أبوي ضربوا شلطوا يجروا وأنا شلعوا لي دنيا.
يعني شدوا؟
هيك سووا لي وضربوني هذا يضرب. هيك. ومضوا لنا عينينا كمان. هيك. ولا عندهم طفل ولا عندهم شيء.
As more and more kids grow up under the rules of this agreement, it will only feed into more violence and a furthering divide. Dr. Hanan Ashrawi was involved in the early negotiations of the Middle East peace process and a former member of the Palestinian Authority. Young Palestinians taking to the streets and throwing rocks say they're not just disillusioned by the occupation, they tell us they're disillusioned by their own government. The Palestinian Authority is part of the occupation.
We're not surprised that the young people are disillusioned and they are angry. They're sending a clear message to the world. The peace agenda, the negotiated settlement, the two-state solution has not worked. The leadership could not deliver.
It seems like there's a bigger and bigger disconnect.
There is a wide gap, yes. These perceptions are cumulative. If you allow your system to atrophy, your leadership to become geriatric, then of course you're going to have a situation of total discontent and anger. The only way forward is through election. We need elections, we need a new leadership, and we need the youth to be part of this.
Until that happens, the youth seem to only gain more resolve in their anger towards both the occupation and their own government.
اليوم الصبح أنا بطلع عشان أستشهد، ما بطلع عشان أروح أضرب حجار بس. كل واحد بيطلع يضرب حجر طالع عشان يستشهد.
ليش تستشهد؟
شو ليش أستشهد؟ أنا شو إلي غير الوطن هذا وشو إلي غير البلد؟ إذا راحت البلد شو بده يصير فيها؟ عشان هيك احنا بنضرب الحجر عشان نرجع لبلادنا ولبلاد لأراضي جدودنا ولأراضي أباياتنا. وهاي الأراضي إلنا راح ترجع. إن شاء الله راح نرجع لها.